Today, we're diving into thematic analysis, or TA for short. Now, it's one of the most widely used methods in qualitative research, for sure, but it's also one of the most misunderstood. We're going to clear up some of the biggest points of confusion and hopefully give you a much more thoughtful way to approach it.
So, let's kick things off with a scenario that I'm sure is familiar to a lot of researchers out there. Imagine this. You've poured your heart and soul into a qualitative study, you've written it all up, and you've sent it off to a journal. And then you get the reviewer comments back.
You see this comment, and at first glance, it seems totally fair. I mean, we're all trained to be objective, to avoid bias in our research, right? But here's the twist. The authors of our source paper, Virginia Braun and Victoria Clarke, argue that this seemingly innocent comment is actually built on a really fundamental and pretty problematic assumption. So, what's the big deal? Why is this a problem? Isn't avoiding bias always the goal? Well, the answer really gets to the core of what different types of qualitative research are actually trying to do, and it's not always the same thing. And here it is, the root of all the confusion. That reviewer's comment, it works from the assumption that thematic analysis is this one single thing with one set of rules. But it's not. It's much better to think of TA as an umbrella term, covering a whole family of different approaches.
Okay, so to really get a handle on this, Braun and Clarke suggest we can think about these different approaches as falling into three main camps, or faces, of thematic analysis. Each one has its own distinct purpose, and it's so important to know which one you're working with. Let's break them down.
This table just lays it out so clearly. That reviewer asking about avoiding bias, they were coming from that first column, the coding reliability mindset. And for that approach, it makes perfect sense. The goal there is objectivity, a single, accurate interpretation. So you use things like multiple coders and measure inter-rater reliability to make sure everyone's on the same page. But look at the third column, reflexive TA. Here, the researcher's own perspective isn't a problem to be eliminated. It's actually a resource. It's the very tool you use to generate deep, rich interpretations. So asking a reflexive researcher to avoid bias is like judging a painter by the rules of photography. It just misses the entire point of what they're trying to create.
So, this one-size-fits-all way of thinking doesn't just lead to confusing reviewer comments, it actually causes some of the most common mistakes you see in published research. Let's dive into a couple of the biggest pitfalls researchers fall into when they're using TA.
All right, mistake number one. This one is an absolute classic, and it's all about a basic misunderstanding of what we're actually looking for in our data. You see this all the time. A researcher might say they found a theme called, I don't know, barriers to healthcare, and then they just list the barriers their participants talked about. Well, that's not a theme. That's a topic summary. It's a bucket that holds a bunch of related stuff, but it doesn't actually tell you anything meaningful about it. So what's a real theme then? A theme, especially in the reflexive world, is so much more than a topic. It's the pattern of meaning you, the researcher, have identified. It's an active interpretation. It's the story you are telling about the data, a story that captures a central, unifying idea that runs through everything. It's an analytic output, not just a summary. And, this confusion between topics and themes, it's often a symptom of an even bigger problem, which brings us right to our second major mistake. Braun and Clarke have a great name for this. They call it confused Q qualitative research. This is what happens when researchers just grab different techniques from different TA approaches and mash them together without realizing that the philosophies behind them are often completely at odds. These mashups just show a deep misunderstanding. For instance, if you're doing a reflexive TA, which is all about your unique interpretation, it makes absolutely no sense to then measure inter-rater reliability. That's a tool designed to produce consensus and objectivity. Demanding that two reflexive researchers come to the exact same conclusion is like asking two poets to write the exact same poem about a sunset. It fundamentally misses the point of the whole exercise. Okay, this next point is maybe the single most important one. It's about a tiny, poetic, and incredibly misleading phrase that you find in almost every other TA paper. It's all about how we talk about finding themes. Come on, you've seen this a million times, right? It sounds so objective, so scientific. It gives this impression that the researcher just kind of stood back and poof, the themes just appeared, fully formed, right out of the data. Let's be perfectly clear about this because it is so important. Themes do not emerge. They just don't. I love this metaphor. Themes aren't these perfect little diamonds just lying there in the sand, waiting for a lucky researcher to stumble upon them. That's not how analysis works.
Analysis is an active process of creation.
You, the researcher, are not some passive observer. You are actively sifting, connecting, questioning, and interpreting. You are building something. You are the creator of meaning. Good analysis is your thoughtful, creative, and interpretive labor made visible.
And you can see this active role built right into the process of reflexive TA. Just look at all the verbs here: familiarizing, coding, generating, reviewing, refining, defining, writing. These are all actions. You generate initial ideas for themes, and then you review and refine them. It's a hands-on, iterative process of shaping and building, not just waiting for something to emerge. So, with all that said, what's the big takeaway here? How are you supposed to think about all of this when you sit down to do your own research?
This is such a great quote to end on. Methodological guidelines aren't supposed to be a paint-by-numbers kit or a full holiday package where everything is decided for you. They're more like a compass and a map. They're tools to help you navigate your own, unique research adventure. So really, it all comes down to being thoughtful and deliberate. Know the TA isn't just one thing. Be really clear with yourself and your reader about which approach you're using and why. Embrace your role as an active analyst. And for the love of good research, please, let's all agree to stop saying the themes emerged. Own your work. And that leaves us with one final thought to take with you. How can you, in your own work, make your analytic process more thoughtful, more creative, and more transparent? How can you make it less like following a recipe and more like the adventure it's meant to be